Hey, welcome back to another episode of Tawana Talks, the show where we spill the tea, keep it real, and hopefully keep you laughing through the ups and downs of motherhood. Today's episode is a real eye opener. I'm too broke to yell. The cost of losing control. Trust me, you won't want to miss this one, so stick around. All right, y'all. You know how we do. Let's get into it. It's morning, and all you want to do is get your kid fed, nice, healthy breakfast, get her dressed, teeth brushed, hair done, and out the door to the bus for a fun filled learning day. And she's complaining about you picking out the wrong outfit, even though she asked you for your help in picking out something for her to wear. The food is not hot enough. She's sleepy. How this is the worst day ever because she didn't wake up a grown up and was able to do whatever she wanted to do. You're overstimulated. She's hyperactive. And before you know it, you've lost it and you are yelling. And the house is suddenly filled with this negative energy. I think I just got real personal there. But we've all been there, right? So, what if I told you that yelling is too expensive in the terms of your peace and your sanity, but it might actually be costing you way more than you think? So here's the deal. What if you put $1? I thought about this the other day. What if I put $1 in the jar every time I yelled? Heck, what if I put a quarter in the jar every time I yelled? Seriously, I couldn't afford it. And I was like, I could not afford it. I'd be broke by tomorrow. Heck, I'll be broke by the end of the day, if I'm being real honest. So, just beyond the laughs, though, as we think about it, and I think that we've all been there. Even the calmest of the calmest moms have had a moment of kind of losing their cool and their temper. But the fact that you are able to kind of sit in that moment and think, what can I do better, says that you're a good mom. So don't beat yourself up if you've had that moment. The fact that you're trying to look at how to come out of that moment says that you're doing a good thing. So let's talk about this yelling and what it actually does. I believe I mentioned before, if not this episode or this season and previous seasons, that I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to teaching and learning and development. And you all remember, and if this is your first time here watching the podcast, I'm an educator by trade, but by design, God has designed me to be an educator. And so I did some research on this. And when I'm thinking about raising ADHD children, teaching ADHD children, and all of those things, when we yell at our kids, we're not just raising our voices, we're actually raising the stakes that have some serious psychological effects on them. It's like we're handing down our own generational traumas, one shout at a time. And I know that it sounds cliche, but if you kind of watch your children and how they interact with other people, you may see some mimicking behaviors of your own that you probably would sit back and say, I don't like it when they do that. Or if you watch your children interact with other people or other children and there's behaviors that you're like, hey, I don't like it when you do that, or I don't like the way you talk to your friend, or I don't like the way you behave with your friend, I can probably bet that quarter that I was going to put in the jar. Now here's where I probably could afford it, because then I can make money from this bet to put in the jar for the yelling. So here, I would probably bet that quarter that I would put in the jar that if you sat back and you kind of thought about those behaviors, they may be mimicking behaviors of you. Um, are the things that you didn't like, and I say that with such confidence because I know I've seen it in me. I've seen my daughter behave in ways that I was like, I don't like that, and excuse me, if I sat back and thought about it, or when I sat back and thought about it, I was like, "Ooh, that's me." So here's an example of that. During the pandemic, we quarantined for real, right? Like, and I'm not saying like we did it better than anybody else. When I say for real, I mean like there was nobody allowed in and nobody allowed out of the house per se. And it was just literally me and my daughter um, in each other's face all day, every day. And she was displaying certain behaviors, and I was like, I don't like that. Where did you get that from? And honestly, literally, she got it from me because she had not been around anybody else, so there was nobody else for her to get it from but me. And so I say that to say that it's not cliche that it costs us a lot more than your environment and your time that changes, or the shift in the environment that changes when you're angry and you yell. So if I had to pay this money every time I yelled, I could not afford it. I would be broke. Now, that's a word right there, like that'll preach. But seriously, because yelling does break something, and it's not just the moment, it's their little spirits. So, all right, this is getting a little bit heavy already. We started in deep, so I've got to pause right here. Because if you're anything like me and need a little more mindfulness in your life, I've got just the thing for you. My Mindful Moments series is all about helping you find peace in the chaos. And guess what? I'm offering a free 7-day devotional to you so that you can get started with those mindful moments. So just head over to my website, tlcollaborative.podia.com, and grab it now. Trust me, it is a game changer. It has true moments in there that we've all experienced, and then giving you a mindful moment to help you get through it. Also with some practical tips that you can start to incorporate in your daily life. That is just a little bit of a shift of a mindset. So while you're over there, make sure you follow me on Instagram and follow my mindful moments and other tips and tools to help you thrive. All right, let's get back into it. So here's where I spill my tea, and don't judge me. I'm kind of nervous about telling y'all, but because in the spirit of being transparent, I'm a bit of a yeller. And you know what? I'm not even going to say I am a yeller because I don't want to take on that identity. I yell. My default setting is loud. So there was a particular moment in my career in education that completely changed my focus when it came to parenting my daughter. I was working under a boss who, let's just say, her way of communicating, her default was loud too. And honestly, it was traumatic, it was toxic, and it was very tense day to day. I think about like the job of the president, and by no means was I running the not I say running the world, but by no means was I in a position that was operating at that capacity. But I say that to say it was so tense that, you know how you see when the president starts, like if we think about Barack Obama when he started in his presidency, he looked young and vibrant, and he, by all means he still is a very handsome man, but um, with the his hair and all the things. But by the time he got to the end of his presidency, or even during his presidency, his hair started graying. And that's what I experienced. I started being like, I know that I'm getting older, but I think that this position and this experience is wearing down on not just my mental, but my physical. My hair started graying faster. And so it was during that time that I started my mindful moments. And this was a way for me to actually get through. It provided me quiet time that I can silence the noise and all of the things that was going on around me. And it provided me a moment to get closer to God and to hear his voice more clearly. I wanted to create an atmosphere for myself where I heard God's voice just as clearly as when I call my children's name, they recognize my voice. I wanted to recognize his voice so that with all of the noise and all of the chaos, I heard my father's voice, that I can still get through it. So it was one particular day during this rough time at work where I found myself when I came home. It was our typical day of my daughter being my daughter, being a kid probably. And I don't even think that maybe she was doing anything extraordinary that caused me to be upset. It may or may not have been, but what I do remember in that moment is I yelled at her. And what made it more of a significant moment and more impactful moment with that yell is I saw in her some things during me yelling. I saw the same fear, the same embarrassment, and the same sadness in her eyes that I felt when my boss yelled at me. And I didn't realize how much I was bringing that home until that moment. And in fact, I remember talking with a friend and sharing with a friend, what was going on at work. And I was like, she yelled at me. And it wasn't until she kind of tilted her head and said, she yelled at you, that I realized, like, oh, that's wrong, right? It became like a normal thing. Like I just kind of, it just fought through it. It was like normal, basically, unquote, unquote. And so that tragedy and that trauma and that toxicity became a normal part of my life to the point that I didn't see anything wrong with it. I felt like it was wrong, but I just dealt with it and then I brought it home. And I was like, yeah, that is wrong. And then when I displayed that same behavior to my daughter and saw her gesture of the way that she looked at me with those same feelings, it brought back to my memory what I felt in that moment. I felt that embarrassment, that sadness, that anger, that fear, and it was like I was looking in the mirror and I knew right then and there that I couldn't keep passing this trauma down to her. I had to break the cycle for her sake and for mine. I never want her to feel what I felt. And if how I spoke to her did that, then I said I needed to make some changes. I needed to do something different. And so here's where it gets real. Like yelling does much more than hurt feelings. And when we're thinking about children with ADHD, it can actually impact their brain development. It's like pouring gasoline on a fire that's already hard to control. So in the midst of yelling, my daughter actually would yell back at me and say, "Stop yelling at me." And that kind of was a trigger for me, like, oh, wait, I'm doing it again, or I'm doing it. But like I mentioned before, the good news is the fact that when you notice and you're trying to do something different and you're seeking the resources to do something different because you notice that there's a gap or a break or something that is not allowing you to thrive in the situation, the good news is you can turn it around. And so we can definitely choose to react differently. But first, we have to look at ourselves, right? And so in that moment, I had to see myself in that situation. And we don't want crazy things to happen in life, but if I can just say that sometimes the crazy things may happen so that we can be able to see the opportunity to make it uncrazy. Right? If everything is all peachy keen, then we don't see any room for growth. And so, in fact, if we think about the Bible, one scripture that comes to mind is a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And that's from Proverbs 15:1, excuse me. And there's power, when you think about that, there's power in staying calm and finding peace and in choosing a different way. There's another saying, and I think it's a Chinese proverb that says, a smile confuses an approaching frown all the time. And so sometimes, even when when my daughter would be upset about something, or she be yelling, or being, I don't want to say dramatic, but having her moment that seems irrational and unreasonable to me, this may not be the empathetic thing to do, but it definitely helps to shift the atmosphere. Sometimes I laugh, not at her, but I smile or do a little chuckle. And it sometimes changes. And it depends on, let me be honest, it depends on the situation. So if she's having a moment that we really need to talk about and I really need to be there for her to cry on my shoulder, I'm not laughing at that. I'm talking about moments like, um, I bit my cookie and I didn't want to bite it. Those type of moments where you're like, all I can do is just laugh at that. Or like the other day, I popped popcorn for her lunch and she said, I didn't want anybody to pop that popcorn. And I was like, did I know that? She's like, no. So I'm thinking, how can you get upset with me about something that I had no idea that you wanted? I am not a mind reader. So in those moments, I laugh and that kind of shifts her mind to think like, yeah, I was being a little unreasonable there. And she laughs too, because that confused her. Like, why aren't you angry with me? And what's so funny? And that helped her to see like, oh, there is something a little more there's something funny about this, and kind of get out of the feeling in that moment and see it a different way. So let's talk about some real practical tips and tools for thriving. I don't think that it would be helpful to just be on here talking about how it affects the brain and how we shouldn't yell and all of those things. And again, we're human, so we're gonna slip up and it's gonna happen. And although that I had a revelation and I had that moment, it still slips up and it still happens because it didn't take me overnight to get here. And so it's definitely not going to take you overnight to get there. It's a process. So just keep striving for it. I said before, and I think I said this many times, that you have a goal in mind, and it's the working towards the goal that you see progress. It's not the achieving of it because we're always becoming. And so, as long as you're working towards it, you have area for improvement and you're doing the dang thing. So, here's what I've found that works for me, and I would like to pass on these tips for you. So, one, practice mindfulness. That's why I did the mindful moments. That's why I have the mindful, which is I call moments, that I put out there daily and on social media, as well as creating a devotional for it because it helped me. And for me, that means to take time to set the tone for you for the day. You can't control anybody else, so you can set the tone for you. So, whether this is through prayer, whether this is through deep breathing, a quick mindful moment, make it a habit to center yourself. Sometimes you may have to adjust your day to get up a little bit earlier so that you can be able to prepare yourself mentally for the day that may be ahead of you. For us moms who are raising neurodivergent children, and for me, an ADHD daughter, sometimes I have to do things on the front end before it starts in the day so that I can be prepared. Notice I'm not saying this will eliminate the challenges of the day, but it will certainly help you to pause and before you react, to take that break and that breath before you kind of react. You can be a little bit more proactive and not reactive. One thing I want to just really make notice of it, as I said, take time to set the tone for you for the day. There's plenty of times where I've gotten up early, and I've done the things that I do to get myself mentally prepared for the day because I don't know what the day has aligned or has set ahead of me, and I don't know how she's going to wake up, and I don't know what are the things that are going to function throughout her day. Like you picked out the wrong outfit. I didn't want to wear that, even though I asked you to pick something out, type of day. In those moments, if I had not done something on the front end to kind of align myself and center myself, and prepare myself to operate in grace, then I'm spazzing with her and I'm meeting her energy. But because I've done the things to center myself, when that energy arises in that space, I can meet it with grace and I can meet it with a more compassionate and a loving tone, still firm, but I'm not losing control because what I've done is I've filled my cup. So I have something to pour out. I'm not running on empty and fumes. And that's what really self care looks like. The second thing that I want to give you is positive reinforcements. And what that looks like for me is instead of yelling, I whisper. And I say reinforcement, this means I am giving her something as a tool for how she can communicate when she's stressed or in a stressful environment. So instead of yelling, I'll whisper the words. And I know it sounds weird and it may feel awkward at first, but trust me, the first time I did it, I just did it out of like, I don't know, it was like a thing, like it's like, oh, let me try this. And I think it was like the Holy Spirit pushed and said, lower your voice. And so I whispered and I said, come. And it works wonders because number one, remember the verse I just said about shifting an angry response. I didn't yell back at her. I whispered, so she kind of stopped and looked at me. So it caught her off track because she had to stop from whatever she was doing and stop in her anger because then she had to look at me like, "What are you whispering for?" So that kind of shifted her brain to think, "I'm not even angry anymore. I'm more curious about why are you whispering." And so it brings the tone down in the moment. It brings the moment, the atmosphere, it brings it to a more calm, even level, excuse me, and it helps you to breathe because now you're whispering. So you have to be intentional about your thoughts and you're being a little bit more proactive because now you're thinking and you're allowing your brain to function. And also you're lowering your cortisol levels so that you can be able to respond more in a way that makes sense, in a less reactive way. You're kind of thinking through those things, having more of a critical thinking response. It definitely creates a desired energy to match. Like I mentioned, if I'm whispering, you are creating an atmosphere and an energy that you're hoping that she matches. Because if you have any experience with children who have ADHD, if you they're going to match you where you are. If you're up here, they're going to be up there. If you go higher, they're going to go higher. And it's very hard to calm them down because their brains are already, their engines are already raveled. And so you have to be able to shift their gears. And sometimes you have to do that with what you do. And so it definitely causes me and my daughter to get more intimate and close. And that'll do the same with you because now I'm whispering. She has to come closer to me to hear me. And that creates for a better communication. And it may honestly even create a moment that's humorous later, like, Mom, when I was all crazy and yelling, why did you whisper? And especially when you get older, remember, we're parenting these children that are going to soon be adults, and we want to be able to have those relationships with them. And so think about the conversation that you'll have, from the experience that you have with your 9-year old when she's 29, and you're like, I remember my mom, I would be acting absolute bananas and berserk, and my mom would whisper. She would just be whispering at me. Like those moments then are hilarious. I think about some of the stories that my adult children share right now about my parenting when they were younger, and I just shake my head and they're like, it worked, or this was absolutely crazy. So think about that. So let's face it, like seriously, an ADHD girl, mamas, they can be trying, and it is almost like trying to herd cats because they are sassy, sassy, sassy. And it's not just ADHD girls, I think girls in general. But the thing you remember is, they are part of you. And so there again, there's some things that you're gonna see that are you. And so it's almost like when you see the memes that is like, when you see the you in your daughter, or that sass, you know, you didn't get that sass from nowhere, you got it from me. Or I want you to be bossy but I don't want you to boss me. Those are like my favorite sayings. Like, I want you to be in control but not in control of me. Another thing I like to say is, you got that from me, and basically like you're learning it, but I can do it 1,000 times better because I've mastered it. And those types of things. So I just think about like when your daughter is being sassy or doing a thing, again, going back to that reflection, like, ooh, where did she get that from? That's probably from me. And that's generational. And so it is up to you to break that generational thing that you don't like, because she can't break it. It's passed down to her. She can break it once she's mastered it and doesn't want to pass it on to her children, but you've mastered it. And so there, you're the one that can break it. And I'm saying that to me as I'm looking at myself in this camera. I'm telling myself, you can break it. So let's, give ourselves a break, basically, literally, pun intended, and just do the best we can. Remember, it is all about becoming, it is all about striving to do better. Don't strive to get it perfect and right, just strive to do better each day, pulling on some of these tools and tactics so that later on, when your child is a grown up and you guys are sitting around and she's having her coffee with you and you guys are laughing about this and you're watching your grandchildren and she's asking you for tips and tools, you can pass these on to her and now pass down generational thriving instead of generational surviving and trauma. So, we have covered a lot today. And if there is actually one thing that I hope you take away from this episode, it's that we don't have to keep passing down pain. We can choose to respond differently, to build each other up rather than tear down. We don't have to break it to fix it. Our kids are not Legos. And basically remember that you're not in this alone. There's a whole community out there that's cheering you on. So go grab the 7-day devotional from my website for a start, to start your own mindful moments and start to develop and create a habit for yourself and your daughter. And let's just keep thriving together through this. This mom life is serious, and I've said it before. It doesn't come with a manual, but we can create little pieces of manuals as we go along the way, to pass on and to help one another out. And that's my goal here. So that's it for me. I want to thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to follow me on social media, Instagram, and visit my website for all resources mentioned here. And until next time, always keep thriving, keep shining, and definitely keep spilling the tea.